Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks so much. Let's Zendoodle. Please do remember to subscribe, share, and support my art on Ko-fi and my patterns on Redbubble. Today I'll be creating a pattern for mom. Mother's Day is coming up and I definitely want to get into the thank you mode. So please get my product if you'd like on Redbubble. You can get it as gifts or you can get it as a gift for your lovely self. I have anything from leggings to pouches and to purses. All right, let's begin. I am going to start with the inking process. I've already pre-done the design because we're going to doodle first or create an art piece first. I'm using the Winsor and Newton ink. It is just the basic ink that students would use, but I find it very smooth to use on texture as opposed to sometimes the India ink or another type of ink. What I find is that this one is not too thick and I don't have to dilute it a lot. So I just use it straight from the bottle, and I think there is about 12 pieces in it, if I'm not wrong, 12 or 8 pieces. You can count. I think probably 8. And I've used this ink numerous times. I find it's very nice to use just to outline things, especially if you're making a comic or so forth. You can definitely go ahead and try this ink out. I'm created a fish. I don't know what came to mind when I created this fish, but I thought I was gonna go with a little bit of an ocean theme. It took me a little while to design this fish because I wasn't sure what the concept would be, but I thought I wanted to do a fish, and then I'm like, okay, let's add some what do you call those, water lily. So the fish is perching on a water lily or swimming over a water lily. I have no idea. All right, just let's go with the water lily and the fish. But the whole idea is moms are so strong. They have the backbone to go upstream even when things are difficult. So that's the idea I wanted to convey. They will swim over things, they will go through hoops just to protect their young. So today is dedicated to all the caregivers, not just moms only, but those who care for someone else in general. So it's not really a koi fish, but a fancy little cartoonish fish with some, this wording that I'm using is not totally calligraphy, but I'll say foligraphy, where you make up parts of it like you're actually creating an art. So not too good with the lettering myself, but I like when I see other people have letterings in. So I'm inking this piece, and it was not a chore to do because it's on one of my watercolor background paper in a booklet that I'm working on. When I'm done, I will definitely give you a flip through of the completion of this watercolor book. But I'm thinking of going with the I don't want to say stripes, but we're using just straight lines this time. So the lines I've thought of, let's just make it into a design that goes across, like diagonal, and just anywhere I can get it, the lines to go, just to fill in the blank space. And then I'd add like the first line, like I will go with 5 strokes in any direction that looks more desirable, and then shading the first blank space. I'll do a pattern design for you sometime soon so we can have a good idea of the types of patterns that we're using. But this is not really a cross hatching, but just more strokes, like 5 strokes or 4 strokes, and then we turn it in another direction just to make it look desirable, and then shading the first blank space. So this took me over 2 hours to do, especially when you're using ink. So the nib that I'm using is just a regular nib. that I actually found at Michael's. If you have a Michael's store near you, that's where I got it. I think I got it for $11 something plus tax, and it comes with the base as well as the gold nib. I don't mind trying out different nibs. I've also had finer tips, but you have to be careful when you're using the nib because sometimes it scratches the paper. So you just have to try different types of nibs and find which one you are most comfortable with. This gold nib that I have, it seemed to have a tip that is not so sharp, but slightly smooth, so it works best for me. It's a little bit thicker, so when I'm working with my strokes, if I want it thin, I definitely have to press a little bit lighter. However, the ink that I'm using, sometimes the pen dries quickly, and you want to be careful at that. So maybe that's the reason why it took me over 2 hours, because I have to keep dipping. This is all speed painting, speed inking that I'm doing, so it looks like it flows really nicely. But I had a lot of issues just to keep it consistent and to get my ink going. So just be mindful of that when you're actually inking. It does takes patience, and it's time consuming. As opposed if you're using the pen itself, you will just flow smoothly. But when you're using a nib and ink, it is going to take some time, especially when you want to get into the small spaces. Just be careful because the ink might be too much on the nib, and it will definitely kind of spoil the design if you're doing intricate designs and you can't correct it afterwards. So be careful because you might dip and then you don't get the consistency you want on the nib, and then you go ahead and try to get it off or shake it off, but it still stays on the under part of it. So sometimes I turn my nib around the other way to make it flow. It does work sometimes, but most of the time it take me a while, and I have to wipe the whole entire nib, clean it off, and then start dipping again. So just be very mindful of that. If you are not doing a design that doesn't require details, like very fine details, go ahead and use a nib, but I would recommend using a pen. But you can use the nib if you want to get practice. Just maybe need different types of nibs and then work with the ones that you think you're most comfortable with. So over 2 hours this project took me, but I was determined, and yes, every spare time that I could find, I would use my spare time to actually do the background. But I wanted to see what the outcome was. That's the great thing about when you're doodling or you're Zen doodling. You get so caught up in the whole idea of what the outcome will be. So you will persist and persevere and you will get it done. And the greatest thing is when you're done and you show it to someone else and they'll be like, wow, that looks awesome. And you're like, you don't know how long this took me. But it is definitely a piece for therapy, relaxation, to get your mind thinking, flowing, and just to bring out the best creative process in you. So it's making you a better person, just saying, like giving you some peace, some time to think. And I just want to say that if you are an artist and you find designing or doing artwork every day a bit of a challenge, for me, learning how to keep my hands smooth and flowing, doing doodles or Zen doodling or Zentangling does help with the process of learning how to draw lines, circles, shapes, because you have to do a repetitive process if you have a design. So if you do not like to practice drawing lines and making your art really like developing your art skill in terms of drawing lines and learning how to make shapes, doing Zen doodle or Zentangling is definitely one of the benefits for artists who are learning to actually keep their lines straight and smooth and being consistent. It's called the repetitive memory muscle practice. So you will learn how to be consistent in your lines and how to hold your hands and the smooth flow to get your designs going. So whatever art or artwork you practice, doing Zendoodle or Zentangling, it will definitely help you. Even mandala too. All right. So the inking is fabulous, which took me over 2 hours, not in one sitting, right? And using Winsor Newton and also my gold nib. So let's get into the coloring. This is the best part for me. So I wanted to incorporate not just doing Zentangle or Zendoodling, but also to show you that you can add a bit of spice to your work. And for me, I like drawing. I did not want to leave that element out. I don't just want to doodle or Zentangle, but I want to add some life to the piece where I can actually add my painting, my gouache, my ink, and make it pop, right? Just pop in it. And I'm also creating this piece as a artwork that if you want the pattern, you can add it to anything you want. I do have it on my Redbubble and my Redbubble shop, so you can get the print. I'll leave the link below. And it's also a piece that if you just want to buy the pattern, you can. If you want to get the product, you can as well. If you want to just work along with me, that's why I did the tutorial, so you can slowly create the pattern for yourself and also like say watercolor with me or create with me. So whichever, I've given you multiple options so you can you know, definitely get your design going and get those creative juices flowing. All right, but if you definitely love my patterns, thank you very much. You can go ahead and seek out my, I just leave the link below, the Redbubble, and support me on Ko-fi, okay? Please and thank you. All right, getting back to the artwork. So I'm adding green. I have a multiple shades of green, forest green, bottle green, and I just take my time and mix them. First, you start with a lighter shade of green because you don't want to overwhelm the piece with a deep dark shade, unless that's what you are going for. So I've done that, mixed my lighter shade, and then I go ahead and apply it to the paper. For me, I do not like to use deep shades right away, and I like to use washes. I work best with washes, whether I'm gouaching, inking, or doing watercolor. My style of painting is working with washes, like diluting the paint and then adding multiple layers and deepening the areas that need to be, so I can add contrast and variety and make it pop that way. Especially for me, watercolor is what I love for staining, so I'm going for that staining effect, and that's what I'm trying to create with my pad, lily pad, as well as my fish. All right, so I'm using, not, I think this is the yellow looks like a curry yellow, not really a curry yellow, my bad, I don't know the colors really, but it is, I mixed it with a little bit of a brown and kind of a yellow to give me an orangey look, but not too deep because I don't want it to be a koi fish really, but I want it to have the similarity of something like a koi fish. Because it is actually a doodle, so it's not a real live illustration, just something cartoony and a bit fun to add a little spice to it. So I'm not totally replicating a real fish. All right, so I'm just going with whatever pops in my mind, making it not too orange and not too yellow. So that's the shade I'm going with. And then I just take my time and add multiple layers, like maybe three washes over it, and each time I'll darken the area, and I keep doing that until I am satisfied. And once I'm satisfied, then I'll probably just move on to another area. If you also notice that when I'm painting, I don't just do one area and complete that. I tend to move from the lily pad to the fish's body, and after the body, then I will probably work on adding another layer onto the body. So I'm giving the piece time to dry, because it's water, okay? And when you do that and give the areas time to dry, you have a better result. Either you're working with wet on dry or wet on wet technique, or you're just doing a dry on dry, which I probably rarely do. That means using straight from the watercolor pan to a dry surface, so it's a bit more challenging to move around. So I don't do that. I love me a wet on dry, and when I'm looking for effect, I will go with a wet on wet, meaning my paper is not completely dry, or it is definitely wet, and I'm adding a wet solution of paint to it. My best technique so far would be semi-wet to wet, meaning I'm using a lot of solution on my brush, and my artwork is slightly wet. But my first initial approach would be a wet on dry, meaning I'm just going right from the wash with my brush straight onto the dry paper, and that works best for me. But I do several washes and several layers to make my art, but then I just keep intensifying the color by adding more paint and mixing it to my original wash to get a deeper version if that's what I want. I've added a little bit of red just to bring some contrast to it. It's not totally red because I'm mixing it into my first wash, which is more like a little brown orange. And that will give it some contrast and make it look a little bit different, giving it some characters. I'm adding it to the tail, mostly to the fin, which I'm thinking I want